Teresita Blanco, the Artsy sister, and we're reading Saturnastra Melina. This is chapter 5, The Butcher of Sassari. Around the time Melina had arrived to Sassari, there had been reports of a serial killer prowling the streets. This killer predated Melina's arrival, and the death of the courtesan was one of his high-profile kills. At the time Melina was blamed for the death of the courtesan, and her nonchalant attitude about the stiff made her look even more suspicious, and no official charges were ever brought up forth, and the Artsy priest had cross-examined the bodies of the victims and found a familiar pattern. All of the victims had one thing in common: they were all women between the ages of 17 and 31. They were in pristine condition, and there wasn't a sign of a struggle or anything, and their bodies had simply died for no apparent reason. And foul play was eventually suspected when more and more bodies started turning up. The kill count was 37, and all of the victims had died when the Titan moon was not out, and popular exaggeration was responsible for calling the man the Butcher. He called him a butcher, but not because he butchered the bodies, but because he had a high kill count. So then Melina and Franny had been called forth by the bounty hunter Frederick Morgan, and he was called into action whenever this sort of business was afoot, and he either caught or slew his mark, and in most bounties he chose the latter solution. And to make interrogation more comfortable, he went to question both maidens in the mirror room, and like the name states, the room had mirrors on all the walls aside from the windows, and he had an elegant white carpet with decorated red designs, and he had several small work desks and a comfortable blue cushioned chairs, and the mirror room was normally used for group learning activities. Melina was sitting facing Frederick, and one of the small work desks separated them, and Frederick had a quill and paper ready to scribble down anything he thought was important, and Franny was sitting beside Melina. And Frederick noted that Franny was extremely nervous based on the way she was unconsciously furrowing her skirt, like she was like squeezing her skirt like this. Yeah, nervously. Frederick could not get a good read on Melina, and he knew she was hiding something. However, he was skeptical about what useful information he could obtain from her. His skepticism was based on Paolo's hearsay about Melina's so-called insanity. And Frederick started as thus: I hear that you were in the gardens in the night of the murder, and can you tell me exactly what you saw? Melina reclined back on her seat and yawned, and then she said, Freddy dearest, do you want to know everything that I saw that night? All the things I saw that pertain to the stiff. I prefer that you tell me everything, and I will decide if the information you had to provide is useful, said Frederick, somewhat annoyed by Melina's informal tone. This won't do, Fred. The trial is probably cold by now, and you took too long to make it here, commented Melina. You may be right, Miss Thorough, and I pity there isn't a faster way of traveling than by horseback, said Frederick. You are mistaken, my good man. May just get around this continent rather fast without the need of horses, commented Melina. This is all well and fascinating, Miss Thorough, but please let's get back to the question at hand. Did you see or notice anything unusual the night of the murder? Said Frederick, getting back to the matter at hand. Melina frowned and said, I can't say. I haven't been here very long. Everything is brand new to me, and still. Like, she wouldn't be able to tell him if she saw anything unusual, because since she's new, she doesn't know what is usual there. Like, what's normal? What is normal here? Well, do you see anything unusual? Oh, well, what's normal? Melina's eyes shifted to a bizarre cyan color, and Freddie noted this change and made a slight note of it. Melina then said, The weather was a bit freaky the night of the murder, and I know that it doesn't rain so much this time of year. Also, lightning storms are a rarity. Why do you think the weather has anything to do with the murders? Asked Frederick. Melina shrugged her shoulders and said, I don't know, you tell me. And do you notice anything strange? Asked Frederick. No, sir, I was too distracted to notice anything, and like I told my ladyship, I went to the gardens to fetch Melina, who was having one of her episodes, and when we got back to our room, through Lady Katya's bedroom, Melina said that the woman was dead and that we should just ignore her, explained Franny in a hurry. And Franny had omitted the part when she had spoken to Impede, and now Frederick asked Melina, When did you notice that Lady Katya was dead? 2 weeks ago, answered Melina. How can it be so? I had tea with her just the other day, said Franny, surprised. So did I. Didn't you notice anything odd? Asked Melina. Well, she did look paler than usual, and when she spoke, it almost seemed, said Franny. Melina interrupted, empty, devoid of life, automatic. Interesting, said Frederick, jotting down this last bit of information. So what you're saying is that a witch killed her, said Franny, trembling from head to toe. It doesn't seem like it, said Melina. Witches usually murder men or drown small children. The whole killing blonde woman of a certain age seems like something a guy would do. And don't you think, Freddie? Certainly, said Frederick. But why blonde woman? Asked Franny. Melina said nothing, and her eyes changed to a thoughtful pale white, and her eyes usually had the same lethargic expression, and Frederick broke the silence by saying, one last question, if you would indulge me. Certainly, ask away. It is not as if I have anything better to do than answer your questions, said Melina, yawning. Her eyes had turned to pale green again. Do you know if Lady Katia had any enemies? Asked Frederick. Franny started to list enemies, but Melina placed her index finger to silence her, and then she said, Lady Katia had hundreds of men and women who would do her harm. As such is our profession. However, none were too inclined to do anything about it. No, this killing was nothing personal. She just got really unlucky, and if I were you, I would avoid the usual suspect. Try asking people who know of her usual routes, and if you plot them on a map, it should help narrow down the search. It's gonna take forever, said Franny, and she added, and in the meantime, the killer's gonna keep killing. You don't have a point, said Melina, but remember, you weren't called until someone important was killed. Ergo, the killer is getting bolder. Seeing as though he got into the pavilion, his next victim could be another blonde courtesan. So, like, they know of 31 victims, but there's actually more because they only know of the rich victims that he killed. So then he started killing blonde peasants, and then he started killing people that were harder to get to. And now he made it into, like, the castle. So, like, the serial killer's getting bolder and stuff. Frederick nodded in response, and he was truly impressed by Melina's powers of deduction, and he also wondered how she had found out about the commonalities of the other victims. Then again, it made sense that Melina would have a stake in this scene, as though she fitted the profile of the victims. Like, obviously she would be worried because, like, the guy's murdering blonde chicks, and she's a blonde chick. So, yeah, of course she would be worried about it. After getting this information down, Frederick went to speak with Impede, and he arranged to have the assassins guarding each of the blonde courtesans, and he made certain to keep this as hush-hush as possible, and he openly stationed guards, the butcher might not strike again. And during those days, Melina continued with her life as if nothing was occurring, and Franny was the one who was very sick, and she would wake up with a start each night, and whenever she did, she would notice that her mistress was missing. And it was thanks to this event that Franny learned that Melina sleepwalked at night. Either that or Melina never ever slept. And Franny almost thought that Melina was a sleepwalker, and after the 7th time Melina left, Franny stopped trying to force her to stay put, and like clockwork, Melina always returned close to sunrise. And 2 weeks passed without any incidents, and around that time there was the usual same mist descending over the city. And Franny noticed that Melina was wide awake, and she seemed quite on edge, and she spoke mechanically whenever somebody asked her a question. And Franny feared that Melina had succumbed to whatever bizarre magic had taken the other woman. And when night finally fell, the entire gardens were covered in a thick mist, and the courtesans were all covering the ground with at least 2 armed escorts. And the whole murder incident had gotten them all paranoid, and close to midnight, Melina had left for her nightly rounds, and Frederick had a hunch that Melina was probably the next victim, and she seemed like the most likely candidate, seeing as though she always walked unprotected. And since Melina had mentioned strange weather patterns, Frederick suspected that the mist was of magical nature, and he imagined that the killer used the mist to strike from the shadows, and he was still a bit uncertain about the murder weapon. And if anyone used a death spell, the local Artsy priest would notice, and they would even find out who had used such a given spell and the target of the spell. So, like, the priest of death, who worships the god of death, if you use like a death spell, he knows who cast it. Automatically, It's kind of like, how like in the Western world, people know who casts what for what one and what whatever. Who cares? Let's move it on. Father was hoping to catch his bounty alive, and the family members of the victim were charging extra for the butcher for the sake of having him publicly executed. And Frederick was also curious about the new despot that the butcher was using, and was really Melina. He naturally lost track of her, and he was so used to keeping up with the pace of a nimble little nymph. And he had an knife for moving silently through the woods, and Freddy was growing frustrated at losing Melina within a makeshift forest, and twice he ended up in the lake, and 5 times he tripped and fell, and he then caught sight of a strange black maiden wearing a noble dress, and he thought it was Melina, but then he remembered that she was wearing her nightgown, and he was a bit distraught to find it hanging on top of a tree branch, and he was startled when he felt something wrapping itself around his waist. And he was about to elbow at something when he felt the soft, delicate shoulder of a woman, and in a soft voice, Melina said, "I knew the voyeuristic type. Can a lady have some privacy?" Melina released Frederick and laughed, and Frederick stammering said, "Don't you think it's foolish to have some tryst with a killer on the loose?" "On the contrary, my dear Frederick, this is the best time for me to venture out," said Melina, putting on her silky night white gown, and she added, "What this killer does is not no concern of mine. After all, I am not his target." "How can you be certain?" inquired Frederick. "For starters, I do not have elven blood, and you should have investigated the pedigree of the victims and not just their superficial look," explained Melina. Frederick smiled, and Melina's disdain was only superficial, and she truly was doing her own independent investigation. And catching his friend of thought, Melina said, "Let's make it a game. If I catch your bounty in there, you must swear fealty to me." "And what do I gain if you lose?" asked Frederick, looking at Melina from head to toe. "You get nothing, seeing as though I already won," said Melina. "What?" exclaimed Frederick. And Melina left his side before Frederick could detain her, and a month went by without any incident, and Frederick feared that the butcher had escaped town, and around that time Melina had acquired a strange little page boy, and Melina claimed that she bought him at a local auction, and the blonde boy was barely turning 5, and he only spoke Elven, and the Elven tongue had been abolished for the last 200 years, and the fact that he spoke that tongue meant an open defiance from his parents. And Frederick wanted to interrogate the boy, but Impede would not allow it, and in the end he decided to just focus on the case. A month, 2 months, 3 months, and no new bodies turned up, and in the end he called it quits. And before leaving, he went to visit Melina one last time. Time, bro?
It's 11 minutes.
He found her in the garden sitting in her hammock, and beside her was Franny sitting in a sewing chair, and the maid servant was busy, and near them sat the little elf boy looking at an ice helmet. And using Melina's own terminology, Frederick asked, "So, Miss Sora, where did you hide the stiff?" "And please call me Melina, and we have been through so much together, and there's no need for formality," said Melina, not looking at him, and she lazily flapped her fan. "As for the stiffs, there is 1 in the rose garden, 2 in the forest, 5 in the lake, and 1 I had cremated, and the other my brother had for lunch," said Melina, yawning. "And now with your morbid jokes, Melina. Where did you bury the butcher of Sassari?" said Frederick, pulling Melina by her shoulder. When she was standing, Frederick did the stupid mistake of slapping her, and a trail of blood trickled from Melina's beautiful lips, and she smiled. While Franny called for help, and one of the knights passing by ran towards Melina, and without asking questions, he punched Frederick in the mouth, and 2 others joined in the fray to defend their beautiful courtesan's honor. And after receiving a healthy workout, Frederick was kicked out of Sassari, and Imperia banned him for entering her domain for the next 2 years. And after the 2-year ban was finally lifted, Frederick got a short note from Melina reminding him that he had sworn fealty to her, and he was free to do whatever he wanted. However, any deviation from her desires meant that he was dishonorable, cowardly, liar, etc. And in the end, Melina reasoned him into becoming her permanent ally. Alright, that's the end of this chapter. Bye-bye and God bless.
Cool.